Hey guys, Brian delivers you the goods here on YouTube this time. So I'm returning to you for another end of the year video that's premiering on the 27th at midnight. I'm gonna get this best albums of 2023 video on TikTok a little earlier than this video on YouTube, but pretty much hopefully you'll enjoy this on YouTube and the other one on TikTok, because the one on TikTok is going to be like about 10 minutes for each section or whatever, but this might be broken down into two parts for, yes, the best albums of 2023 video that I personally thought were the best albums of this year. So I'm going to discuss from 51 to whatever number I get to for this first part, because I believe this will be the first part, and I'll let you know my thoughts on what are my favorite albums of this year. So let's dive into the first one, which is number 51, which is Soen Memorial. Now I know some people thought this was not Soen's best work. I did not hate it. I mean, I don't know. There are some tracks that are a little mainstream, and I can understand why some people have issues with this record. I don't hate this record. I actually like this record, in my own opinion. But that's my personal opinion on what I think of it. I like Unbreakable. I like Violence. I like the first track on the record, and it's really good. And there's some tracks on here I could really dig and listen to. So it took a little time, but it's not one of my favorite records of the year, but it is on the best albums of 2023. So number 50, or number 51 I meant to say, is Soen with Memorial. Now at number 50 is Demi Lovato with Revamped. I think she did really good on this compilation album. I do own it on CD, but I just can't get it right now because I'm basically not able to get it, because it's somewhere buried in my CD case, in my CD storage bin. But still, I think most of the rock version tracks of Heart Attack being my least favorite, but I think Give Your Heart a Break was my favorite one. Even though Burt McCracken kind of annoyed me a bit, I still thought the track was pretty strong for what it went for. And everything else about the track, the other tracks are for this revamped version of the rock versions of her older material. Like Confident was pretty good, that rock version to that. Cool for the Summer was probably my favorite song from this revamp thing. So basically I think Demi Lovato did a pretty good job on this compilation album. So at number 50 is Demi Lovato with Revamped. Now at number 49 is most likely going to be Atreyu with A Torch in the Dark EP. I think this EP was pretty good, but there were some critiques I had with this EP. Come Down was not my favorite song, in my opinion, because it was a little cheesy in its own way. So it's a kind of an average track. The other tracks are pretty strong, but this, the final song to close out the EP itself, is not great. And I know it's on the Beautiful Dark of Life album, which is on my Decent to Good albums of 2023 video. Excuse my yawning. But still, I just wasn't really connecting with Atreyu's A Torch in the Dark. I think it was pretty good in its own way. 3 out of the 4 songs were pretty strong. The last song was not my favorite. It was average, but it could have done better. So, number 49 was Atreyu with A Torch in the Dark. Number 48 is Lacey Sturm with Canonic Metanoia. I know I gave this like a 9 out of 10, but I kind of am downgrading it now because I haven't really returned to it too much. But most of her vocals throughout this record was actually really good. And I was really connecting with this album in its own way. And yeah, this was a pretty strong album. So I had to put it at a lower spot than the Atreyu spot where they made it at. But still, number 48 is Lacey Sturm with Canonic Metanoia. So at number 47 is Within Temptation with Bleed Out. Now, I like this album, but they released too many fucking singles for this record. I think 7 out of 10 songs, maybe more than that. It was a lot of singles. I will tell you that. It was way over half the record. And I think it was 7 out of 11 tracks or something like that. I can't remember, but it was a lot of singles. And I was very disappointed that they took too long to release another full-length album, which is only 11 songs. I did the album review for it a little bit ago, like 2 months ago, for Bleed Out, but I didn't hate this record. It's pretty strong, but it does have its problems with, like, spoiling the record too much. Way too much. So, number 47 was Within Temptation with Bleed Out. Bleed Out was probably the best track. Entertain You was pretty good, even though that's a 2020 track. Then The Purge was pretty good. We Go to War is my favorite. And Sharon's vocals are quite amazing throughout this record. So there's some pretty good, strong vocals from this record. So basically, number 47 was Within Temptation with Bleed Out. Number 46 is Saliva with Revelation. Now this was a pretty good album. I was really impressed with the lead singer's vocals in this record. Thought I wasn't going to really enjoy it like I should, but I still think it's a strong record for what I went for. So at number 46, can't remember all the songs because it's been a little while since I returned to it, but I remember enjoying it. But to continue where I left off, at number 46 was Saliva with Revelation, and number 45 is Primal Fear with Code Red. Now this was a pretty strong record. I'm really liking the thrash metal stuff that Primal Fear is doing with their music, and this album does rock for sure. It's one of my favorite records this year, and most of the tracks did entertain me for what it went for. So number 45 was Primal Fear with Code Red. Like I said, didn't return to this after a while, but I remember enjoying it. Number 44 is Buckcherry with Volume 10. I know they did a cover track from the Bryan Adams song Summer of '69, and I think that was pretty strong for Todd's vocals when he's singing it. And honestly, I just really enjoyed this Buckcherry album because this was probably their best album since Warpaint. And I know they did a 2021 album, which I think was alright, but not great. Warpaint was pretty good, well, a good record, but this one was probably their best. I think the 2021 album was pretty strong. And give me a second, guys, I gotta pause the video. Sorry, guys, for the delay. I actually had to help my mom out real quick with something. So, basically, she called me on my cell phone. That's what happened, basically. So, yeah, number 44 was Buckcherry with Volume 10. Now, number 43 is going to be Fall Out Boy with So Much for Stardust. Now, I actually did enjoy this Fall Out Boy record. This is probably their best comeback record in a while from their pop stuff, because Mania really set them back big time, in my opinion. And overall, I think Fall Out Boy did put out a pretty strong album this year. I was very entertained with this Fall Out Boy record, and I was really enjoying the majority of the tracks, like My Love from the Other Side, or Love from the Other Side, and Heartbreak Feels So Good, I believe, was another one that I did enjoy. The third track was not my favorite, but it was okay in a way. It just wasn't my favorite. It was my least favorite. But everything else about the record really entertained me. So basically, sorry, I was actually eating something and just picking out something. So number 43 was Fall Out Boy with So Much for Stardust. Now number 42 is Bush with the Art of Survival Deluxe Edition. Now it had the extra 5 songs, which is only 5 tracks for this 12-track album, plus the extra 5 tracks with All Things Must Change, which is my favorite track, and 1,000 Years featuring Amy Lee, I think is her name, from Evanescence. Yeah, I was trying to think of her name, and I completely forgot. And the 15th track was not so bad. But they did a greatest hits recently that I did not check out because I didn't feel like I needed to. But honestly, I think this was a pretty strong Bush record and pretty good. Even The Art of Survival was my favorite record of 2022. One of my favorite albums of that year. So number 42 is Bush with the Art of Survival Deluxe Edition, and number 41 is Royal Blood with Back to the Water Below. Now this record actually really entertained me. I did not think I'd like a Royal Blood album as much as I did. I mean, Typhoons was pretty good, but that took time to grow on me. This record actually did grow on me throughout time. But yeah, pretty much the overall song Pull Me Through is one of my favorite singles. Mountains at Midnight was pretty strong, and the second track was actually pretty strong too. I really enjoyed the funky beat to it, and I think Mike Carr's vocals were pretty enjoyable throughout this record. I mean, there were some symphonic noises and how the melodies were sounding in this record. It kind of did set me back a bit from really liking it. It took a step back from me giving a care about it. But overall, I think the record did impress me. So, this was a pretty good album. So, number 41 was Royal Blood with Back to the Water Below. Like I said, it took time for this record to grow on me. But it did come out a week early than it was when it was supposed to come out, which was September 8th, but it got pushed up a week early because I guess they finished the record. So, at number 40 is Ava Max with Diamonds and Dance Floors. Now, this record really impressed me for a pop record, and I really enjoyed Ava Max's vocals in this album. Cold as Ice is my favorite song. And then Dancing's Done is my favorite. $1 Million Baby is a pretty strong track, along with Maybe You're the Problem, which was pretty good. And One of Us was pretty strong, but yeah, Cold as Ice was one of my favorites. And Weapons was one of my favorite tracks for this record too. I did enjoy this record for how it sounded, and I think she really pulled it off with this album in a good way. So this was a pretty strong record for a pop album. So at number 40 was Ava Max with Diamonds and Dance Floors. Number 39 is Nothing Nowhere with Void Eternal. Did not think this artist would make it on my best albums, but he did. I think this record really grew on me. I do own it on CD, and I'm glad I do, because I'm not getting rid of it. It's not worth getting rid of. It is such a fantastic album. Not fantastic, but pretty good in its own way. So it's a pretty good record, and I think Thirst for Violence was my least favorite, but it is growing on me throughout time, along with, I think, the Cyanide track. Pete Wentz was my least favorite. It wasn't the strongest track, but it wasn't bad. I think the 9th song on the record was one of my favorites, but Venom was a personal favorite of mine. I can't remember the 9th track's name, but it features lead singer from Static Dress, I believe. But I think it was really good. And I liked Nothing Nowhere's vocals in the chorus, the "It's Too Late, I Just Wanted to Say That I Need You" thing. And this album did pull it off with the execution. So Venom was the best track on this record, along with the Tragedy track. So Anxiety was pretty good, and other songs too. So basically, number 39 is Nothing Nowhere with Void Eternal. Number 38 is Dying of Everything by Obituary. So this record actually did pretty well. I haven't really returned to it since it came out at the beginning of the year, but I did remember enjoying it, and I really had a good time listening to it. Very entertained with the screamer vocals. His vocals, I should say. His vocals were really amazing, and I really enjoyed how this execution for this album was. So at number 38 was Obituary with Dying of Everything. Haven't returned to it in a bit, but I remember enjoying the record. Number 37 is Sylosis with A Sign of Things to Come. Now this features the guitarist from Josh Middleton that was in the band Architects for a time, and then he left the band to pursue his career with Sylosis, his own band. And I did not know he had his own band until now, and I was pretty entertained with this record. And honestly, I think this record did pull it off with some of the execution, and his screaming vocals were pretty outstanding. Not a lot of people really cared for this album too much as they should have, but it did resonate with me with the execution, so pretty strong record. So at number 37 was Sylosis with The Sign of Things to Come. Number 36 is Pierce the Veil with The Jaws of Life. Pierce the Veil, I meant to say. I did like Death of an Executioner. That was one of my favorite tracks to open the record. Pastor Nirvana is one of the strongest tracks for this record, and I did enjoy it. Even When I'm Not With You is one of my favorite songs too. It grew on me throughout time. I know a lot of people thought this record was the weakest Pierce the Veil album they've listened to this year, but honestly, I enjoyed it. I found enjoyment in this record. I like Vic Fuentes' vocals. I mean, it's weird, but it does sound good with how it is. So, basically, Pierce the Veil put out a good record this year. A pretty strong record. Emergency Contact was a favorite of mine, along with Flawless Execution. Was pretty good, and the title track was pretty good too. The other tracks were weird, but they did pretty good. We Share Trauma, or Shared Trauma, I think it's called, is what the song's name is. That one, I don't know if I liked, but it was alright. And 12 Fractures was not terrible, but it's a good closing track for what it went for. So Far So Fake, this track is, it's pretty good, but it's mostly Vic Fuentes does a lot more clean vocals through this record, and I was surprised with it, but overall, the execution of this record was pretty strong, so did enjoy this record. So at number 36 was Pierce the Veil with The Jaws of Life. I did listen to this album today, just so you know, that way I could talk about the tracks a little more. Now, number 35 is Corey Taylor with CMF2. Now, I did enjoy this record. Talk Sick was a pretty strong track to open the record, along with the other track that was one of my favorite songs this year. Beyond was not my favorite, and there were some other tracks that I had my critiques about, but overall, this was probably his best record since the CMFT album. I think this record was better than CMFT. So honestly, CMFT was not my favorite record. It just had some cringy tracks through it. There were some tracks I could get on board with and some that I didn't give two shits about. So it was one of his weakest. It was okay, but it was his weakest. But this one wasn't, because there were some strong tracks from this record that I did enjoy. We Are the Rest was my favorite. The Nowhere to Beat Me, Nowhere to Win. I really enjoyed that. And he did a lot of screaming vocals to this record, and that's what I really enjoyed about this album. So, pretty strong album. So, at number 35 is Corey Taylor with CMF2. Number 34 is Alice Cooper with Road. Now, this was a pretty strong record. I did enjoy this Alice Cooper album with how it sounded, and I think he pulled it off with this record. So, there was some weird lyricism that he was singing about, but my name is Alice, I think. Her name is Alice or something like that. I can't remember the track's name, but that was the title track and the first single for the record. Every other song did execute pretty well, but overall, I think the 8th song on the record was the most funniest, where he said something about once you hit 27, well, then you die, or whatever. And I'm like, this dude has some humor to his lyricism with his songs, and I'm just like, this is some weird shit, but funny shit in a sense. He adds dark comedy with his lyricism for his music, and that's what I think is pretty genius of Alice Cooper, because he can make dark humor and dark humor work with the lyrics he writes. So basically, I think at number 34 was Alice Cooper with Road. Did enjoy this record, and I had a good time listening to it. Number 33 is Hawken with Fauna. This was a pretty strong record. I did enjoy this album for how it sounded. The Alphabet of Me wasn't my favorite, but everything else was pretty strong from this record. The other 8 songs were pretty strong, so yeah. Number 33 was Hawken with Fauna. I can't remember all the songs' names, but I remember listening to this record and enjoying it for the progressive metal stuff they were doing with this album. Number 32 is Sevendust with Truth Killer. Holy Water is probably my favorite track from this record. I did enjoy this track for how it sounded, and overall, I think this album did pull it off with the execution. And basically, I was really digging this record for how it sounded. So, there was Holy Water, there was Truth Killer, the title track. Everything was not my favorite, but it was fine. Fence was probably the strongest track from this record. Superficial Drug was not terrible, but not my favorite of the singles. But it sounded alright. But everything else was pretty strong from this record. And I think this was Sevendust's different kind of album they did with this record, but it did sound pretty heavy with what they went for with this record. So at number 32 is Sevendust with Truth Killer. Blood from a Stone was their previous album before this one, and it wasn't terrible, but I didn't really come back to it after a while, because I just didn't feel like I needed to, because it came and went, mostly, that record. Number 31 is Tommy Vex with Antarctica. Now, I was going to put him at a different list, put him on a different spot in this list, but I did enjoy his record. He was the former lead singer of Bad Wolves, but he went solo because they had a fight and an argument about a political issue, which honestly, they did mend ties, and kind of, that's one of the lyrics from Father and Son off this record. But Smoking Gun was my favorite track. I like Tommy Vex's vocals in this record, and mostly his singing vocals through his singing career is pretty outstanding. But I know there's some controversy with this guy. But I don't try to look at that because I do enjoy the music he puts out. And he did comment on my channel from last year from the Grand Theft Audio album review I did, which thank you for commenting, and I appreciate that. And thanks for noticing my channel. It really means a lot, because I am a big fan of Tommy Vex. I mean, I don't agree with his political stance, but other than that, I learned to appreciate the art from the artist. In a sense, it depends on who the artist is, and if I really do like them. When it comes to Ronnie Radke, that's a different story, because I don't separate the art from the artist with that guy, mostly, because there's no reason to. I just don't really like Falling in Reverse anymore, and I gave up on them. So, basically, overall, I think at number 31 is Tommy Vex with Antarctica. Number 30 is Story of the Year with Tear Me to Pieces. This was a pretty strong record. Really enjoyed this album. I like the title track. Real Life was pretty strong too. Afterglow was pretty good. Dead and Gone was pretty catchy. But overall, I think War was a pretty strong track too. And Can't Save You was pretty good. 2005 was solid. And then you get Sorry About Me, which is not terrible. But Use Me was decent, at least. The closing track was a decent closing track. Decent closing track for the record. But Knives Out was a pretty strong song for this record. Along with Take the Ride. And yeah, there was a lot of great tracks from this record that I did enjoy. So, number 30 was Story of the Year with Tear Me to Pieces, and number 29 is Pop Evil with Skeletons. Did not think they'd make it under the top 30, but they made it at the highest spot in the top 20, or kind of the top 30, I guess you could say, in the upper 20s mostly. So basically, Pop Evil did do pretty well with this record. Circles was my favorite track, along with the wrong direction, and Who Will We Become was my favorite. But Worth It was such a emotional track with how he was singing the track. So basically, I think this record did work for how it sounded overall. So I think they did pretty well with this record. So at number 29 is Pop Evil with Skeletons. Paranoid, Crash and Burn was pretty good as well. That was one of their strongest tracks. Arrival was the opening intro. Dead Reckoning is pretty good. And there's quite a bit of other tracks that were pretty strong. Eye of the Storm was pretty good. But, Sound of Glory and Skeletons were solid songs, but not well executed in a sense. But overall, still a pretty good album, and Raging Bull was my least favorite too, so yeah. Number 28 is Blink-182 with One More Time. I think this was their strongest record to date. I really enjoyed this record with how it sounded. I don't care what Brad Taste in Music said about it. It's calling them Stink 182. I didn't like that he did that, because I was like, dude, you gotta kind of stop with that shit. Because honestly, I don't hate Brad Taste in Music as a YouTuber, but sometimes with certain videos I don't necessarily agree with him on certain critiques he has and his opinions on almost everything that he thinks sucks. And I'm just like, dude, I will agree with you on AJR. I will agree with you on Falling in Reverse. But everything else, like Mulaney Martinez, I can agree with him on as well. But everything else, it depends. Like Nickelback, yeah. Nickelback did screw up on their last album. Big time. The Get Rollin' album, which wasn't a good album in any way. It was just disappointing. I was bored with that record. So, overall, I think One More Time did impress me. Childhood was the best track. I'm glad they brought Tom DeLonge back in this band, and I was really impressed with this record, with how it sounded overall. And just, the title track was the most personal track that they put out. More Than You Know was my favorite. Turn This Off was just all fucked up with how Tom said, if you're an asshole with a dick, then that's something I can lick. Then maybe we can call ourselves proctologists. I was like, what the fuck? That's some weird shit. But knowing Tom DeLonge, the lyricism there was kind of cringe and sus. But I think the drum work and the execution was great. Anthem Part 3 was the best track for this record, but Childhood was the best closing track, along with See You being a great deluxe edition track. It's a digital deluxe edition along with Cut Me Off, but they were pretty strong. And yeah, Edging is not the best track, but it's solid. It takes time to grow on you, I guess. And When We Were Young is a really good track, along with Terrified, and Fell in Love was not my favorite. Dance With Me, I think I could really appreciate that track a lot more, because it does grow on you after a while. The Teach Masturbation thing was the weirdest fucking lyric, honestly. I was like, what the fuck is this shit? So basically, overall, I think Blink-182 impressed me with this record overall. So at number 28 is Blink-182 with One More Time. Number 27 is Ice Nine Kills with Welcome to Horrorwood Under Fire Deluxe Edition. It only has 3 songs from this deluxe edition, and one of them wasn't great. It was kind of mid and could have done a lot better. But it was an average track, but it could have executed a lot better. It was the Rainy Day remix track that I did not care for because I couldn't really get on board with that. The mixing was kind of piss poor, and just overall, no. So at number 27 was Ice Nine Kills with Welcome to Horrorwood Under Fire Deluxe Edition. I think this was a great record. Meet and Greet was the best track out of all that, and the shower scene acoustic was pretty good, so did enjoy that too. And overall, pretty strong deluxe edition for what it went for. Number 26 is Crown the Empire with Dogma. Now this is a pretty strong record that they put out. It took me a little time to get used to Superstar. Superstar's not my favorite, but it's alright in a sense. Someone Else is one of the best tracks for this record. I like the CD version of Dogma because when you hear Immortalized, you get to hear Chris Motionless as a feature artist in this version of the record. And that's what I really liked about the record, because he was in the 8th song, Immortalized. Dancing with the Dead was pretty good. Paranoid is pretty strong. Labyrinth is the best closing track to this album, and I think they did a pretty damn good job with the final 3 songs for this record. Well, final 4 songs, but still. Strong ending to the record, and good opener for Dogma, the title track. It's pretty good. It just takes a little time to grow on you, that song. But also, Black Sheep was pretty good. Modified is a least favorite, but everything else is pretty strong for the record, and In Another Life is pretty good. So, number 26 is Crown the Empire with Dogma. Number 25 is Periphery with Periphery 5 is Not a Genre. This is a pretty strong record. I really enjoyed this record with how it sounded, and overall, I think the execution for how Periphery made it sound. The only song I had an issue with was the one that sounded very synth electronic wise, and I didn't really connect with that one. It was average, but it could have done better. Overall, the record did impress me with how it sounded. So at number 25 is Periphery with Periphery 5. Gent is not a genre because they're a gent metalcore band, and I really enjoyed their sound overall. Number 24 is Crosses with Goodnight, God Bless, I Love You, Delete. Now this is one of their best albums to date because it is an electronic album and it's Chino Moreno's side project when he's not with Deftones. And I think there's a lot of great songs from this album. I think there's a few least favorites, but overall, I think Runner was my favorite. And then you have Light as a Feather being a pretty good one. And what's that other one? The second song on the record. Pleasure is pretty good, but overall, the record did entertain me. I liked the last song on the second to last song. Goodnight, God Bless, I Love You, Delete is a great closing track to this album. It's very haunting of a track, but sounds really interesting. And I just like the synth work in this whole album. The production is pretty spot on great. And this is an album worth purchasing, in my opinion, because it was such a great album. So at number 24 is Goodnight, God Bless, I Love You, Delete by Crosses. Number 23 is Sleeping with Sirens with Complete Collapse Deluxe Edition. Now, I think this was one of their best Deluxe Edition versions of Complete Collapse. Even when you include the regular edition, it's pretty good, but the Deluxe Edition sounds pretty good. It just took time to grow on me, this Deluxe Edition, but it did. There was maybe one song or so that I couldn't get on board with, but everything else was pretty strong, like Don't Let the Party Die was the best closing track. That one took time to grow on me because of it being the final track for the whole album, for the whole Deluxe Edition. There's only like 5 songs or so that you're going to be getting for this Deluxe Edition, but they execute in an alright way. So overall, I would say Sleeping with Sirens Complete Collapse Deluxe Edition is worth checking out. So, and the acoustic songs are pretty good in a sense. So, yeah. At number 23 is Sleeping with Sirens with Complete Collapse Deluxe Edition. I'm going to have to return to you for part 2 for the remainder of what I have left on the list. There's from 22 to 1. Hopefully I can get it done in that video, and hope you enjoyed this 38-minute video for basically the best albums of 2023 part 1 video. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next part. This video will be out on TikTok early, just so you know, but it's going to be condensed in certain videos because I'm going to have some things to talk about with it, and I might only be able to do 5 or 10 albums to talk about in each video. But still, I hope you enjoyed this 38.5-minute video, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in part 2 pretty soon.